coming up this week on the show, a special show for you. Dan Phillips from Korg R&D in California is joining us to talk about the new Korg Multi, and he's got announcements coming from Korg today. We're talking about brand new Korg devices in the show this week. So we're going to talk about the Multi, brand new devices, the inspiration behind the Multi, all that kind of stuff. Wave shaping, you're going to find this really interesting. So let's get to Dan Phillips. Dan Phillips, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ian.
And it's great to get you on because this is a really busy time of year for you. Explain why it's a busy time of year for Korg R&D.
Well, it's we've got the NAMM show coming up, and we don't announce things at every NAMM, but this NAMM we're announcing a couple things, and so we're kind of cranking along and getting ready. A lot of this busyness was in the fall, actually, trying to get ready for manufacturing, because one of the things that we're showing is actually a physical object which is going to be shipping, and so for that you have to be ready a couple months beforehand and have all your ducks in a row and all your factory software ready, and so because things move on ships and ships aren't really fast, so if something's going to be released in January, then you have to have it you have to start making it in October. So been very busy.
And I should say Dan Phillips from Korg R&D in California. And have you got one of those little stickers on you? Actually, I was going to say I like the little thing that comes in the box. The Korg R&D. Yeah. So I wondered if you had one of those on you, so actually tattooed on you somewhere.
I don't have one tattooed on, actually. I was very happy when that was all the idea of people at Korg Japan, so that was very nice of them to do.
Yeah, I think it's really, really nice. I've got it actually on my wave stake. I've got it stuck on the front there. I think it's a nice little touch. So I wanted to talk to you about Multi. I've had my Multi for a few weeks now, and it's a couple of months since you first announced it. But also, I wanted to talk about other things you've got announcing at NAMM as well, which would be great. So let's start with the announcements, and then we'll talk Multi. So what have you got new that's coming up then this year?
All right, yeah. So we're talking a week and a couple days before NAMM, and so on the day of NAMM, we're going to announce the Multi-Poly module and the Multi-Poly native. And so basically the idea is that these are the additional form factors of the Multi-Poly, and that's really how we're thinking of software and hardware is it's horses for courses. So we have now the Multi-Poly 37 for people who want desktop compact keyboard. It's awesome for that. And then we've got the Multi-Poly module for people who would prefer to just have a desktop module without a keyboard. And that's also a little bit smaller. It's 19-inch rack mount. It's much the same form factor as the ModWave and WaveState. And then we've got Multi-Poly native, and Multi-Poly native brings the Multi-Poly into your DAW and AU and VST and AX, and that's pretty neat too.
Yeah,
so we're excited about all of these things.
That's brilliant. I'm so pleased you're announcing the rack version. I've been doing videos, and most of the YouTube commenters have said, I'm waiting. Oh, and I've seen it on GearSpace as well. I'm waiting for the rack version, and it took a while for the ModWave and the WaveState to get one. So I think that shows. Does that show a confidence that you've got in the Multi-Poly that you can release the form factor almost straight away?
Well, it shows a confidence in the Multi-Poly, and it also shows, as you say, that we're hearing the demand for modules, and so we really wanted to release it in time for people who were excited about the instrument to buy it.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be neat. It's very similar to the ModWave module in that it still has chaos physics on it. It's just a little bit smaller, but all the same controls as the keyboard, and I think it's going to be neat, and it will be interesting to see. So this is an opportunity for those people who've been saying that they want modules to put their money where their mouth was. A couple of years ago, it was being very difficult to convince the company in general that modules were an important thing, and now it seems like the sales of the ModWave and WaveState modules are convincing people that it's a viable market. So. I think it's neat too, because it enables us to we have the ModWave keyboard, which is a beautiful little device. You can show it. It's got the wood panels and the lovely aluminum front panel. And it's very solid.
it's
Yeah.
wired in, but yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a lovely. This is the multi-poly. Yeah, lovely device.
Yeah. And I think it's a great little package. But there are some people who, either don't want a keyboard at all, or who would really prefer to use, an 88 note weighted controller, or, a key stage, for instance, from Korg with Poly Aftertouch. And so this gives people an opportunity who still want to have the tactile control, but don't want to have the keyboard attached to use it. And then, of course, there's the software, which is for people who don't need tactile control at all, and who, in particular, prioritize the DAW workflow. And that's the other thing that we're seeing with this, is trying to work with what we see as this kind of divergent market of, there are keyboard players, and then there are synth guys who are more interested in the tactile control of the sound surface. And then there are people doing DAW workflows, composers, producers, songwriters, who are really, really focused on things in the box and don't have very much space for stuff that's out of the box. And so trying to look at those different communities and see what they need, and provide this same awesome core synthesizer in all those form factors.
Yeah, I think it's great that. I mean, I've got the wave state module, and that's hooked up to my key stage, and it fits on the back of the stand on the key stage. So it's like, it's like a synth, but of course I've got Poly Aftertouch, and I can use the key stage for the other stuff as well. So I think that form factor worked well for me. But I like the multi-poly 37 key. It's there in front of me. It's great for sound design, but for when I'm actually composing, I tend to do the sound design and the initial track on the, that one track I'm working on the hardware, and then say, okay, that's the bass bit done. I'm going to hand that to the BST version, and then I can now do the next, the pad sound on the hardware, and then do that and hand them over, and that workflow works really well for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that they're bringing out. It's been I think it's had a really good release. The multipoly. You must be pleased with the feedback that you've seen.
Yeah, very much so. It's very gratifying. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like we're hitting a chord with people, and it's a great sounding synth. As you're saying, are you working on some sounds for it?
Yes, I've just released actually last week. So as we release this last week, as we record it today, yeah, I've just done the first sound pack. So I've got, but I'm already on volume 2 and volume 3. So I've been really inspired by it. It's got a brilliant set of sounds. So let's go back to, so where did the idea for the multi-poly come from?
That's a great question. I mean, a long time ago, we were thinking about what, we were kind of imagining what a series of synthesizers would look like if they were based on these kind of historical Korg things. And so we actually wrote out a big long list of possible synthesizers. And so the first one we did was the wave station with the wave state, and then we did the DW with mod wave. But there are two things I think that are kind of important. One of them is that the multi-poly is based on the monopoly, right? And the monopoly was this very unusual synth that Korg made. And it's a really neat mono synth that can also be a kind of unusual polysynth or paraphonic synth. And so it's kind of this cool synth that occupies its own niche. This sort of strange experimental synth. So that was really cool. And then also my group has done a lot in the past, and then has recently done as well, work with analog modeling. So we did a lot of analog modeling stuff 20 years ago, working on stuff for the original Oasis and Oasis PCI, and then the Oasis keyboard and Kronos. And some of that stuff is still really awesome today. And like Sync, for instance, Sync on the monopoly had the monopoly's approach to sync is really neat. So on the original monopoly, you've got sync and you've got cross mod, and you can enable one or the other or both, and it's this, and then you've got this effects on off button. And so the idea, I think, was that you would set up something interesting with sync and or cross mod, and then you could like put it on for a lead and do something really crazy, and then turn it off again, and have go back to your kind of normal sound. And I thought that was a really neat idea. And so sync is a big part of the monopoly, and so with the multi-poly, we're able to leverage our really, really, really excellent digital sync. It's recently I went back and was having a discussion with someone. I said, yeah, I think actually our sync is really still very, very good in comparison to other, analog modeling, virtual analog things. And he said, no, well, it's been a long time. I'm sure it was really good at the time. And I went back and I listened to a bunch of new analog modeling synths, and there are some very nice analog modeling synths out there, but our sync is still superior to anyone that I've tested. It's just, it's clever. We have some patents on it, and it's bright and snappy, and anyway, it's nice. So we have this background of working with analog modeling, and then we recently also were working on the ARP 2600 plugin, which I think we probably talked about in the past. And so that was a whole lot of work with analog modeling and looking at different filter types, and working with oversampling and seeing what was necessary there and what wasn't. And so we pulled out a lot of the work that we were doing kind of simultaneously, actually, for the 2600 and the multi-poly, in terms of thinking about analog workflows and, what can we do with analog envelopes that hasn't been done before, hasn't been done quite right, and what can we do with, inheritance of voice characteristics and that sort of thing. And so we were kind of combining this affection for the vintage monopoly and all its unusual and cool approaches to things, and a return to our group's roots to a certain extent in working on the analog modeling aspects of things. So anyway, that's a very long answer. I always give very long answers. I'm sorry, but those are the kinds of things that led to the multi-poly as it is now. Yeah,
and it's got a really interesting architecture. So when you came to decide how to layer that, I can see the inspiration, the 4 oscillators on the monopoly, how you could have them different. I've got the Korg collection version. That's the only time I've played it, but I do like it on there. So you can have like oscillator 1 a square, and oscillator 2 a sawtooth, and oscillator 3 a different pitch, and I like, so I can see where the inspiration came from for that, because that you've got the 4 layers. But especially compared to the mod wave, there's so much stuff that you've introduced. Is this like you've got wave shaping, and you've got those classic oscillators, the digital oscillators? So where did you bring all this together? What was the thought process to bring all these different elements into it?
Well, let's see. I mean, the first thing, the 4 oscillators, right? Part of it is about layering different sounds. The most interesting thing I think about having 4 oscillators in one program is that they can interact. And again, that was something that the monopoly could do, that it could make these a couple types of very unusual sounds by syncing oscillators 2, 3, and 4 to oscillator 1. So not just the kind of classic paired sync where you have one oscillator syncing to another, but one where you have 3 different oscillators syncing. We've got a couple sounds that demonstrate that in the presets, and that's sort of this unusual specific feature that's really beyond layering that you can do with the 4 oscillators. So that's cool. Yeah, and so why did we do more? Well, part of it is just that we're always interested in pushing boundaries, and we're interested in what we can do in the digital domain that might be more difficult to do in the analog domain. And so we were thinking about what's the monopoly? What was the monopoly? And the monopoly, to a certain extent, was when people were still kind of figuring out what synthesizers should be. And so if you have a modular synth, for instance, you might have 4 oscillators in your rack, and you could control all of them from one control voltage, or you might be able to split things out and control each of them from a separate control voltage. And that's kind of what the monopoly was doing. The monopoly also was looking for kind of experimental, unusual ways of doing things. So the curious round robin between the oscillators, for instance, where you can, as you said, you can have the oscillators have different waveforms and different pitches, and you press once and you get oscillator 1, you press the second time you get oscillator 2, you press the third time you get oscillator 3. The approach to sync and cross mod, labeling those effects, and just looking at this, it was Korg at the time had the Poly 6. That was a kind of contemporaneous keyboard to the monopoly. The Poly 6 had 5 more filters and 2 more oscillators, but really the monopoly is this large control surface, and there's a lot that's there that is designed to be able to make unusual sounds. And so we thought, well, okay, what can we do now in the digital domain with the flexibility that we can bring to bear there to make something like that, a little compact keyboard that can make a whole bunch of different sounds. And so we're thinking, okay, well, obviously one of the things that is interesting right now and has been interesting for the last 10 or 20 years is the whole Eurorack enthusiasm. And so one of the things about that has been being able to combine all sorts of different filter types and envelope types and oscillator types, and take all of those together and make something that's unusual, interesting. So we said, okay, well, in Eurorack, what are the things that are kind of related to analog synths that we would be interested in? And so, of course, we have the classic oscillator, which so we've got that. What else is interesting? Well, West Coast synthesis with Buchla is very interesting. I went to school in Berkeley, had the opportunity to meet Don a number of times. Very interesting guy, and a very different approach to things, right? So the idea of wave shaping is that it's more of it's with the Buchla synths, it's sort of you start with this additive, or you start with this generative waveform, and then you go through subtractive synthesis afterwards. And so we already had some wave shaping technology, which we played with in the Mod 7, for instance, for Kronos. And so we thought about that, and what could we do there that would be interesting, that would contribute to this kind of a modular synth in a box sort of thing. And then, of course, we've been doing wavetable things with ModWave. And the wavetable in multipoly is a little bit different in a couple of ways, mostly due to the ability to interact freely with other oscillator types. So we thought, well, that's really neat. We can bring that in. And so then this idea of kind of swapping out different oscillator types, and of course the classic oscillator, the analog oscillator, has some different types in there as well. Like we've got the shark fin for doing mini mode stuff. So we went in and looked at our filters again, and we really liked our filters, but the multipoly actually goes beyond, and we kind of rewrote all of the filters in there. So it's all for people who are fancy about this sort of thing. There are zero delay filters, and they have beautiful nonlinearities, and they just sound, they sound rich and fat, and they squeal if you poke them.
And they sound different as well. That's what I've noted. There's a real difference between them.
Yeah. Glad to hear you say so. It's that's certainly there. And so so this idea then kind of we kind of just started to roll with this idea of having something that was a little bit more like a modular or a semi-modular system in a box. So where you can swap out a whole bunch of different components. That's why we ended up with 2 filters, because it's nice. It's nice to have 2 filters, and also you can do things, especially with parallel constructions, where you can move one source or multiple sources from one filter to another filter in real time, and of course you can process 2 filters together in series. So simple things like using a high pass, but other also kind of more strange things using multiple low passes in series, or band passes in conjunction with low pass or high pass. And anyway, the whole idea kind of snowballed as things sometimes do. So, so as you say, it's very deep and very fun and very flexible, and I think it'll take people a long time to kind of get to every corner of it. But yeah, I don't know. That's some stuff about how it came together.
I mean, the 4 oscillators and 2 filters, you can create like a dual layered performance with a single program. So you have 2 oscillators going to one filter, the other 2 oscillators going to the other filter. It's almost like a dual layered patch on a mod wave, but then you've got 4 of them. So you've got 8 layered patches that you can do. I mean, it's the options you've got on it are amazing. I found it really, really interesting. You've got so many, great ways of routing all these things. But what I found particularly interesting and was really helpful is the templates that bring everything together. So you mentioned there's multiple filters. First of all, like I said before, the filters are great because you can hear the difference in them. Especially when you start playing with resonance, you can hear a little difference. My favorite one, I think, is the SEM one.
Oh, okay.
I really like the sound of that one. It's got, but then if you want to do something different, a softer sound, then you can use another one. But the SEM one does sound really good. I've managed to do those big sort of Oberheim type brass sounds with that. I was playing with the Phil Collins studio big brass sound, and I also could do the sequence bass sound as well. So you've got the nice split between the the studio bass sound and the brass sound. But yeah, but the filters are really different sounding, and the multi-poly filter actually is a really nice. I always found on the mod wave the poly 6 is the default filter, isn't it? I think. It's a nice gentle filter. The multi-poly is a bit more aggressive, a bit more about the resonance on it. But yeah, you've got those nice. And then you've still got those the low pass and high pass ones, the ladder ones on there as well. So yeah, it's a bit. There is a lot there, but what I was going to say is when you start to do the sound design, those templates guide you in the right direction. So what was the idea behind coming up with the templates?
Well, like you said, there are so many different options in there, right? So if you're wanting to do a Prophet, for instance, or a Mini. We have envelope templates and VCA templates and filters for each of those things. And so, rather than having to go in and, set your polyphony to 5 voices and set your, set your oscillators to classic and set your envelopes to the pro shape and set the VCA to the pro shape, you can just kind of call it up and it's all there. And actually, those started from the main DSP engineer on this project, or one of the 2 main DSP engineers on this project, just going through and making these things. What did he call them? He called them. Oh, I would have to look back and see, something like Playground. I can't remember. But he would set one up for Oberheim, and set one up for ARP, and set one up for Prophet, and set one up for Mini, and so and ultimately, I think those are really useful because, among other things, you can mix and match, and that's very cool. But it's also nice to just be able to say, okay, I want to do a Prophet set right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the sets that I'm working on that I will be releasing in a few weeks. I guess is a whole Prophet set. So I've done the In the Air Tonight pad, and I've done the sync, and but by forcing yourself into those limitations of the 5 voices. And using this, it really does come up with something different that if you just got everything available in one go, it's too many options. So I think those templates are great, but they do make a difference. But I was going to ask you particularly about the filters. Are obvious, you can hear them. The envelopes, what's the difference on the envelopes?
Well, so there are 2 things. One is the envelope shape as well. Is the envelope shape by itself. Sorry, and then the other question is. How the envelope interacts with, especially the VCA. So envelopes have curvature, and on analog synths in general, it's basically a kind of a charging and discharging capacitor. That's how you do an actual analog envelope. Many analog synths, later analog synths, had software-based envelopes, and that's a different thing. But if you charge a capacitor, it makes this kind of shark fin shape. So it goes up and it kind of gradually approaches the top. And actually, in general, you have to stop it before it gets to actually wherever the fully charged state is, because it'll just go on forever. It's an asymptotic approach. So you have that, and then it drops down more quickly. And so analog synths do that, but when I was talking about where you cut off, that basically is how we're achieving the curvature, and it's what analog synths do too. So you determine at what point you stop and then fall back down, and that determines how sharp your attack curvature is. If you take a little tiny portion of that, it's fairly linear. If you take a long portion of it, it takes a long time to settle. And so our attacks do that, and the release also, right? If you go down slowly, or if you go down more gently, it produces a very different character. And when you bring the VCA into that, it's this whole other thing, because the VCAs, again, they're not infinite. They'll have a point where they cut out and a point where they saturate. And so the mini Moog is interesting because the mini Moog VCA saturates at a lower point than the amp envelope, and so the amp envelope will go up. And it's a long time ago, people were looking at this and trying to figure out what's interesting about the mini Moog envelope. Why does it sound so awesome on bass? And they realized that there was this kind of flat peak at the top, and so that's one of the reasons that some people started putting a hold parameter in their envelopes. But that's actually not how the mini Moog works. It's clipping. So the envelope comes up, and then the VCA stops responding at this line. The envelope goes up, and all the time it's up here above my arm, it's just producing a flat output on the VCA. So that's one way that VCAs can make a difference. And we actually have, if you want to simulate that with the envelopes, we have another parameter called overshoot, which does something similar on the output of the envelope. But we kind of put that in there, and it's neat because it means you can route that effect to something other than the VCA, but you don't have to use that in conjunction with the VCA. You can, if you're trying to do the mini, you just have the mini shape and the mini VCA, and then it responds that way. Similarly, the profit, on the other side of things, when the VCA CV input is approaching 0, they have different cutoff points where they just go silent. And so if your VCA is responding to to a decaying release envelope, on the profit, for instance, it actually stops long before it would stop on other instruments. So you get a much it's a more abrupt release. And again, this is something that varies depending on curvature and time, and so it's something that really does interact with the voltage going into it. Trying to think of other things, and there's hysteresis on that, so it turns on and turns off at different points, and it responds non-linearly. So we didn't include distortion, saturation in there, but the VCAs don't have a linear response to the control voltage input, and so they have a little bit different characters. And again, that alters those curve shapes in interesting ways. So anyway, there are lots of different sounds in there, and the thing that I do these Christmas songs where I'm going back and recreating an 80s track, and one of the things there is I'll go in and try to duplicate a sound, and sometimes it can be pretty frustrating because you think, well, it's an analog synth, I've got it's an analog synth sound, I've got an analog synth here, maybe sometimes I've got something that claims to be a model of that synth, but I still can't get this sound from it. And sometimes that turns out to be things like portamento shapes, and that was another one that we forgot to mention, and or envelope shapes where there's just something that's characteristic about the synth that pushes the sound in a slightly different direction. So anyway, it's neat to experiment.
And the VCA has got the same, isn't it? You can choose so combine the VCA with the amp to get the best. Yes, exactly. Yes, you combine the VCA with the amp envelope, and that's the way to do it. And again, the templates kind of do that for you, so you don't have to go and make the two settings. It's cool that you can. Ultimately, I think we made the right choice there to keep them separate. But you could also see a synth where you just flipped a switch and it was profit, and then was a mini, and then so be a little bit of a different approach. But I like.
approach.
I managed to recreate. I've got the Odyssey plugin from the Korg collection, and I've made some Genesis lead sounds, and I managed to
of the monopoly.
Yeah, it's not on the Odyssey. I made the Genesis lead sounds,
okay.
And then on the monopoly, I've recreated those using the template. So I've just started doing a few of those. So I was able to get the in-cage type, solo sound that I'd spent ages doing on the Odyssey, and I managed to really copy it over effectively by putting it into using the template and then doing it by ear, but just setting things up. So yeah, I really like that approach to it. It works, and when you start changing the thing, this works. Something you alluded to before. Once you start doing it, and then you break that template to make it even something different. So I think I was doing something with the Odyssey one, and I changed it to the SEM filter or whatever, and it sounds completely different, and you've got something new then. And that's one of the nice things about the sound design on the synths is that I start doing something and end up with something completely different. It turns out to be a great sound. So I like the idea that you haven't fixed these templates in as locked in. You can mix and match them, so you can have a mini envelope with a monopoly filter and a Prophet amp, and you can mix and match all of them as well, which I think is really good.
Cool.
I think the four layers though, and the 4-layer approach with the 4 oscillators means you can get a really rich set of sounds from it, especially because you've included the motion sequencing on there. So I was pleased to see the motion sequence, and I guess the motion sequencing for anybody who's used the mod wave, it's pretty much the same idea, which makes it really easy to get into if you've programmed on a mod wave.
Cool.
I was doing I'm going to do a tutorial video actually on Depeche Mode, Enjoy the Silence. One of the commenters said, "Can you do it?" So I think most of the time I think yeah I can. So, but actually I managed to do it, but I can use the motion sequencer to get that sort of stepped effect. So I really like combining the motion sequencer with the other layers as well, so you can sort of build up these. I'm a big Tangerine Dream fan, and it's ideal for that kind of repetitive Berlin school of bringing them together. And some of the presets, I've got to say, the presets on here I think are probably one of the best that I've come across. I felt the mod waves presets gave you a flavor of what it could do, but I think these presets give you a more rounded set of presets, if you know what I mean. I think the mod wave were great for pointing you in the direction of things you can do, but I think you get a more idea with these multi-polys. So all the programmers, I recognize many of the names on the presets on there, and including a couple of people we've had on the show. So yeah, they are a really good set of sounds on there. It's really usable as well. You can quickly incorporate them into your own performances as well.
Cool. Yeah, we had a lot of really great programmers. So I'm going to go through the list just so I don't forget any. But Airwave is awesome. Most of these guys we've worked with before. Bill Barton, you'll see he was one of the 2 main DSP engineers, and he did a bunch of this.
I spotted his name on the templates.
Exactly. Yeah. He's the one who did Tom Sawyer Sweep too, which is the one that
that's brilliant.
Put first. So awesome. And Francis Prav, who's just a genius, and he's a really nice guy. Great working with him. Houston Singletary, and I love him. I've known him for a couple decades, and he's a great guy and did a bunch of great sounds for us. Jack Hotop, JH, there is a legend, of course, and did a bunch of sounds for us. And John Lemkool, otherwise known as Plugin Guru, did a bunch, and then Matt Pike, and of course Peter Schwartz.
He's been on the show.
Yeah. He's an awesome guy. And then a woman named Tara Bush, who does kind of more experimental synth pop stuff, did a couple. And then we had a couple guys at Korg Inc., Yuki Oda and Kanamori-san. And these guys are fantastic. They've been doing stuff for Korg for a long time. And one of the things is we've got, 330 sounds or something like that. And we have about that many more. So I'm sure we'll be releasing more sounds. But yeah, I'm very, very pleased with the work those guys did. It's fantastic stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. Just go back onto the wave shaping then. this was new to me. I've never used that, but it could produce some interesting effects. I seem to get the idea that you can actually produce filter type effects without using the filters. Is that part of that sort of school of thought on that?
Yeah, absolutely so. And so so I was mentioning that, you know, they were that's sort of that's the West Coast versus East Coast synthesis thing, right? So East Coast Moog is completely subtractive. So you start off with very, very bright waveforms, and then you filter them down. So Buchla's approach, which of course has kind of expanded into wave shaping in general, was to allow you to, at the source, at the oscillator, start off with something simple. I mean, there are some similarities to FM, and you can kind of get some similar bell-like sounds.
Yes, I found that. Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. You can by varying the gain into the wave shaper, you can go from dark to, you know, very bright and gritty, depending on what you're doing. And what we've done with ours, we did actually one thing that I think is really neat that I'm not sure if many people have done. But you can use the Berkeley style for Buchla sounds, but then you can use all sorts of other wave shapers, right? And again, you know, basically you always start off with the source, which is a sine or a triangle wave, and then you add harmonics via the wave shaper. And so in general, you do that. You modulate the gain into the wave shaper, and it goes brighter or more crazy. Control it that way. And controlling offset also will do different things. So you hit the table, you hit the shaper at various different points. The thing that I thought was pretty interesting was varying the pulse width of the duty cycle for the input wave, for the sine or triangle. And I had not seen that before at least on an integrated wave shaper oscillator, and it produces these sounds which aren't quite like pulse width modulation, but get you there. It certainly can drive things into more craziness at high gain levels or high pitches, but it gives you this kind of interesting wobble that I thought was very neat. And so I'm kind of proud of that aspect of things. Yeah. So as you say, it's a more generative approach within the oscillator itself, and then you can filter that or not filter it as you choose. So
yeah, you can kind of create filter sweeps without using the filter, and then you've got two filters to use for something else, which is always interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing that's sort of I read when I got reading through the product spec is the CMT, the component model technology you've done. In the manual, it mentions about this sort of the ID number and the sort of this unique. So just explain to us what that is.
So this whole idea is, as you say, based on this, you know, component modeling technology, which Korg has talked about for years. And the basic idea is that the analog devices have all of these little different parts, and they're calibrated as much as they can be calibrated, or some of them in some cases can't even be calibrated. So they'll, you know, you have these circuits, and you can use, you know, 1% resistors or 5% resistors or 10% resistors, and the parts, you know, can be the parts will be similar but not exactly the same. And so each voice that you play on an analog synth, even if it's a calibrated synth, is going to be a little bit different. And the idea behind this was you can really hear it if you are layering sounds or playing chords, especially, and especially with pitch, but with everything else as well, with filter, it can be very obvious. So this gives you this sort of natural richness without trying very much. And the combination of that and drift means that I am reaching much less frequently for, you know, kind of manually detuning oscillators. You don't actually have to do a lot of that. It just kind of naturally acts like an analog synth and sounds rich and a little bit loose. And, you know, your envelopes timings can be a little bit different. And the way it's most interesting to me to go in and then to go into a sound like Tom Sawyer Sweep, for instance, or any of the classic analog stuff that we've set up, and just turn all that stuff off. Turn, you know, there's a scale all master for the voice variation, and you can turn oscillator drift to 0. and it just kind of, you go, oh, that sounds like a digital synth now. And then you put those things back on again. It's like, oh, okay, here's my nice warm analog synth back. It's fascinating how these little deviations really contribute, I think, to the overall warmth of the system. And so again, Bill Barton was one of the main guys who worked on this, and he said, well, okay, that's cool. And so there is stuff in there that fairly unusually for a synth that does dynamic allocation, we try to keep track of each of these little voices. So if a voice plays and it has, if it has certain characteristics for its filter, like its envelope maybe is a little bit faster than the envelopes, and its 4 oscillators are detuned in this particular way, and its filter cutoff is calibrated just a little bit differently. We keep track of those voices, so the numbers aren't assigned randomly. It's a voice has those characteristics, and when it plays again, it has those same characteristics, and it maintains its phase for its LFOs and even its oscillators. It maintains the state for the envelopes. So the envelopes, if you leave them long enough, will generally go back to 0. But if you restrike that note, it starts wherever the envelope is. And that's something that's pretty easy to do on a synth with fixed allocation, meaning, this has 8 voices, and that's what it is. This has up to, 64 voices for each of its layers. And so it's pretty hard to keep track of those things. So we actually have 256 voice cards, and we keep track of all of those. And so if you play on one and then come back to another one, that voice card still exists, is still keeping track of itself, and will still sound that way. And so you were asking about CMT IDs. And so the CMT ID swaps around the voice cards. It has a different set of voice cards. And so if you wanted to, and this is more just kind of a cool, fun thing, but unless you've gone in and set that CMT ID the same for 2 different multipolys, the 2 multipolys will sound a little bit different.
Excellent.
So if you were to layer them, it would be, again, like having, 2 Prophet 5s in the studio. They're going to sound pretty similar, but not exactly the same. And so that's a very fun thing, and especially with the software, for instance, you can try that with different instances, and just you can call it the same sound in the 2 instances and layer them together, and it's a neat fat sound that's not the same as just playing the same sound twice.
Yeah, that's really nice. There's those nice little touches that make a difference. I always see people, on forums. Is it warm? Is it cold or whatever? And I think it's not always quantifiable, but I think it adds to that. Little touches like that add to it, and I think the characteristics of the different models, filters and envelopes and everything else, just go on to give it that little bit of warmth. I found the basic, the standard oscillators, the classic oscillators, the detuned versions of those are really nice, and that would be something that would take you 2 oscillators to do, but you can do it in the one. So you've got those 4 oscillators in one layer. But you can detune them, so that's like having 8.
Right.
So within one, So straight away, if I wanted like a detuned patch on the mod wave or the wave state, I would use 2 oscillators apart. But you can just use that one oscillator in the detune mode, and straight away you've got that really rich sound. So I think things like that make it really interesting. The fact that you're only using one oscillator out of your 4 layers to get a detuned sound, and so straight away it opens up massive complexity, and I think it's brilliant.
That'll combine with, I don't know if you noticed the detune control on the front panel of the multi-poly, but this is something straight out of the monopoly, and it's not actually related to the detuned oscillators, I'm sorry, except for the fact that it's a detuned control, but because they had so many oscillators, 4 oscillators, it was they were thinking about what can we do, and okay, it's neat. One of the reasons for having 4 oscillators is to be able to have kind of a fat detuning thing, but that means you have to go into each of the oscillators and tune this one up and tune this one down. So that one little detune knob leaves oscillators 1 and 3 at normal pitch and tunes, I think it's 2 up and 4 down, and you just turn that one knob and you get this kind of spreading detune. and that's sort of brilliant also. So I would play with that. And of course that works in conjunction with the other with the detuned saw oscillators. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and then you've got unison modes and whatever. You've got loads of ways of doing it. The other couple of things, in a sort of homage, I guess, to the monopoly, is the 4 layers can rotate, can't they, as well? But so that you can play like you could on the monopoly. It switches between the oscillators, but this is switching between layers, which I also found very interesting.
Yeah, I really like that. I've been fascinated by that sort of thing for a long time. It's a technique called hocketing, which I think goes, I don't know, at least back to medieval music. So the idea being that you would take a melody and you would toss it back and forth between the instruments to get this interesting timbral variation that goes along with the melody. And so, yeah, this is just, it's another way to approach that. And I think it's really fun and direct. It works, yeah, it's really nice with arpeggios, but also just really nice for playing. And in fact, I've used it for pads a little bit, and I think it's really neat there. It's kind of not obvious. The first thing you do is you say, oh, okay,
Yeah.
But if you just play chords with it, what ends up happening is you get this combination of this random synthesis thing with the idea of an ensemble. So if you have an ensemble like a string quartet, for instance, or a brass section, you've got each note is being played by a different instrument. And so, the different instruments have different timbres. And so as you play these chords, each note in the chord is played by a different timbre. And so this gives you that as well. And I think there are a couple sounds. I might have done one of them for playing these kind of interesting pad sounds, which have, one note does this, one note does this. And, it's another way of getting this kind of interesting semi-stochastic variation into the sound, and that's the sort of thing I'm really interested in.
I'm going to try that with a pad sound. One thing I did find to do as well with the motion sequencer is do the same effect but with the single layer. So using the motion sequencer with the note on advance, you can get it to step through the 4 oscillators as well. So I do like that as well, to recreate that monopoly sound as well. There's actually one other thing related to that is and the arpeggio is really a thing I'd put as a feature request for you. Is the arpeggiator. I love the arpeggiator, but I'd like you to switch the arpeggiator per layer so that you can have a pad sound and an arpeggio playing at the same time. So put that in your feature. If you've not already got it, put that in the future models.
We've talked about that, and so I appreciate that.
I can understand why it does it. Because it's like the monopoly, but I prefer the mod wave behavior of that. So there you go. That was my feature request for you.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great instrument, and I love the fact that you're putting your money where your mouth is with the model, with the rack version and the software version as well. I think that's great, and I must also compliment the keyboard. The keyboard is much improved over the other small keyboards as well. So it is of those form factors, it's probably the favorite keyboard.
Yeah, I agree on that. Yeah.
So what's next for you guys then? I know you won't announce, you don't want to talk about things that haven't been announced, but where do you go next with these ranges?
As you say, it's something I really don't talk about. So I can't really talk about any future plans. I'm not sure what else I can really say about that, unfortunately. It's this whole idea of flexible digital synthesizers has been a focus of my group since I joined in 1990, a long time. And so I think we'll continue to explore that. We'll continue to see what can be done, and in small form factors, we'll continue to explore what can be done with with powerful off-the-shelf components like the Raspberry Pi CM4 that's in this. And it's one of the things that's neat to see is you have your computer and your DAW, and modern computers are really very, very, very powerful, but they also have a lot to do. And so when you take something that's still a pretty powerful CPU and you just devote it to doing audio, you can do really a lot with it. Surprising amounts of power in these tiny relatively inexpensive CPUs, and so I think we'll continue to explore that and see what new things we can bring to bear there. I'm sorry, I can't give a better answer, but
no, that's the good answer. I mean, you I have the thing say, right, that I don't need any more synths. I'm not buying any more synths. And I said that when I got the mod wave, and then I got the wave state rack, and then I thought, well, that's it now. That I'm done now, because especially when the 2600 plugin came out, I thought, well, that's going to satisfy me. And then you announced the multi-poly, and I had to get that one. But then no more. One of the things that I've seen a lot of people ask for, I don't even know if it's possible, but you still think about is a Uber synth of this, to have an 88 note keyboard with the mod wave, wave state, multi-poly all built in. So yeah, well, I know people would like that, but I'm not sure. Like these things, it always seems a good idea. People say, "Oh, I'd love that," but if it was, price and everything else, and people don't actually buy it, but I think a few people have asked for that. So it's certainly like a concept one. Maybe you could build your own concept version of it, like concept cars, where it's not maybe a product you ship, but yeah, we'd like to see an Uber synth. So see what you can come with. Yeah.
What would you do if you were telling us, if you were appointed boss of Korg R&D, what would you tell us to do?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I was trying to think of that one, because I was trying to think of what classic Korg synths you've yet to look at for B, or haven't released an inspired one. So I actually find it difficult to say, actually. Yeah, it is difficult to say. You've got the sample based one, you've got the wavetable based one, and you've got the mod wave, which does both, and you've got then the multi-poly, which does the analog modeling. So maybe there's some digital synthesis to throw in there next. So maybe something like that. But yeah, I'd also chuck in the big one with them all on there. Although I can't buy any more synths, so don't build that one for me.
I'm gonna try to get another synth in your studio. That's gonna be my goal.
Yeah, I think so. Of course, you mentioned the 2600 plugin. That's been great as well. I do find that one really useful as well. I really enjoyed. I actually learned a lot about synthesis from that as well. I've got to say, from analog synthesis. I think it's been great. Yeah. So that's my answer to your other question. Something digital. I'd like to see what you guys come up with next. Well, it's been absolutely brilliant catching up with you. Dan, really pleased you could join us, and telling us about the products coming at NAMM as well, which is really great. So I'll include links to the core products in the show notes, and also the sound packs that I've got. I really enjoyed doing those, and the tutorial videos. I love doing the tutorials. So I've got a Tangerine Dream one coming up as well. So
cool.
Yeah, I've loved doing those, and the mod wave has really changed my approach to music in the last few years. It's been a real inspirational device. I've got a lot of synths, and the mod wave is the one that twigged, something clicked, and I think it's just the editor and everything else. It's all brilliant. So really, that has certainly changed. I mean, I've started doing these videos and sound packs, so it's changed my life a bit. So I really love that. So thanks for that. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll hopefully see you on a future show where you can talk about something new again.
All right, that'll be great, Ian. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan. That was great. You can get all the sound packs and videos and everything else on our YouTube channel. It was really good to talk to Dan, and great to get those product announcements as well. Thanks for watching this video, and see you on the next one.